I'm going to be talking about some projects that I've been doing based around a larger project in Minahasan in North Sulawesi in Indonesia. But basically what I want to address is, it's the thing that we've been talking about all day. How do we document the intangible? I'm dealing with, I think, that most intangible of things, language. We could probably argue about which is the most intangible heritage, I guess, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that it is language. It's fleeting. Once you've spoken it, it disappears. We've got ways of recording it, and that's how we are documenting it. I'm approaching this as a linguist. I'm interested in the study of the structure of languages, but I'm also looking at cultures that are changing very rapidly, and I want to do justice to that, I guess. While I'm trying to record the language and what's happening with the languages there, I'm also interested in what's happening to their culture and what's happening with their material culture. What are the processes that are changing? What kind of techniques do they have? What sort of activities do they do? And, well, how do we document them, and how do we present these documentations to others? So I'm going to look at two case studies. One of them is an endangered economic activity. It's the production of palm sugar, which is becoming quite industrialized. It was a cottage industry, but it's becoming an industry. And a regional cuisine, I guess a way of cooking and eating things that is distinctively Minahasan, this being the place that I work. So to put it into pictures, documenting processes like, how do we get from the guy up in the tree chopping off the flour of the palm sugar into the palm sugar after it's been dried in coconuts. There is a process that happens there. It's traditional knowledge, and it's been quite an important part of the economics of that province. Or how do we get from this? How do we get from a bat to a cooked bat, if you like? I dare say not everyone faced with a bat like that knows how to end up with the delicious looking yellow curry. So just a little bit of background. I have been researching in Sulawesi now for about 15 years. It's quite a strangely shaped island, as you can see. It's slightly smaller than Great Britain, with a population of about 16 million people. According to the ethnologue, it's got 114 languages. I can't personally verify that, having not checked them all. It's certainly got a lot. The population is concentrated, especially in the South Peninsula, the South West, but it's also relatively dense for the island in the northwest tip, which is where I have been working. And the economy, well, there's the 4 C's, cocoa and coffee in the south, and cloves and coconuts in the north. These are the kinds of things you can meet if you work in Sulawesi. The smiling macaque, the cute little tarsier, and the babi rusa. They also all get eaten if they're not lucky, but they're all protected, so they shouldn't be eaten. So I'll go here first. So my project is called Languages of Minahasa. Minahasa being the name of the very tip of the northern peninsula. And it's funded by the Australian Research Council for 4 years. And the aim is to comprehensively document and describe the languages of the region. And it's focusing on 3 of them, 3 kind of core languages as being representative of the languages of this region. And one of my aims is to examine the extent of grammatical variation among the languages. So just for that purpose, I want to have a way of collecting data that means it's comparable across those languages. Just a little bit of background there. Particular issues in Minahasa are that the languages are all under pressure from Manado Malay and Indonesian. So there are 8 local languages in the region. They are closely related to Philippine languages. They are not very similar to Indonesian, much more similar to languages like Tagalog. in general, it's only the oldest generation who are still fluent in these languages. So basically 50 and above, and people still speak them. Under that, it's unlikely that they will have much control of the languages. You see a fairly steep drop-off in fluency. And the last domain of use of the languages tends to be in the farms and the gardens and the forests. They've kind of become their unurban languages, if you will. They are associated with, I guess, traditional and old-fashioned activities. So this is where we tend to find them still being used. But the catch-22 there is that the speakers who are elderly are becoming too elderly for that kind of work, and so they can't be recorded in situ out there. Meanwhile, a lot of the traditional practices are changing through modernization. Indonesia is changing very rapidly. I think you would have to agree there. It is modernizing and globalizing at an extreme rate. So there are lots of things changing, and there are lots of things to document. And another salient fact here is that Minahasans are very prone to immigration. There are emigre communities living in diaspora all over the world, but very significant communities in Japan, in the Netherlands, in the US, in Australia, and in Hong Kong. In fact, I discovered there are quite a lot of Minahasans working here as maids. Whether that constitutes a community, I guess it's a little bit hard to say. So I'll just show them the map just for a bit of background. So the relevant languages that I've been researching are Tonsea, Tombulu, and Tondano over on the western side there. That's their traditional territories. Okay, a little bit of background about what it is I'm actually planning to do there when the ARC fund me to do a language documentation activity. What is that? We did have a bit of background from before, but language documentation is a kind of subfield of linguistics that's sprung up in the last 10 to 15 years, and it's a response to language endangerment. The fact that a lot of languages in the world are dying out at an increasingly rapid rate. And it's based on the idea that we ought to be able to record and transcribe and translate and analyze as much language data as we possibly can, just so we know as much about these languages as we can before they disappear. With luck, they won't disappear. You know, who knows, something may happen, but I think as a documenter, I can't make a community keep speaking its language, but I can record it and document it and value it in that way. Most documentation projects are funded with an aim of archiving a corpus, and that should be archived for posterity in some way, and I'll be talking a little bit about archiving soon. So language documentation is connected to but distinct from language description, which is something that linguists have traditionally done. We write complicated grammars, make dictionaries, make text collections, etc. Typically written for linguists, as a descriptive grammar is not a light or easy read that people will indulge in for fun. They tend to be quite technical and quite dull. So this is an example of something that I made. This is some language documentation, if you will. I've recorded some speakers talking about wedding practices, and I have transcribed it, I've translated it, and I've gone to the trouble of chopping up the words into morphemes, etc., so I can do my linguistic thing, that thing that I like to do. So this is one example of what data looks like, or it can look like from the point of view of a language documenter as a linguist. What happens to it? It gets archived, and this is my archive page. They've found a terrible picture of me with a beard and put it in there. I have no idea where they managed to find that, but this is an endangered language archive. This is the one that's based at SOAS. It's funded by the Hans Rausing Endangered Language Project. They have funded a lot of projects, and a lot of them are fairly similar to mine. They went out, they recorded a lot of data, it's digital, it lives in a digital archive that you can access by becoming a user, by becoming a subscriber, and the archive has its own protocols and its own ways of working that I guess you need to know about if you're going to use it. This is an example of another archive. This is the DOBES archive, which is based in the Netherlands, funded by the Volkswagen Foundation. You can see that there's a lot of data in there, and you burrow down and down and down to find what kind of recordings and what kind of data they've got in there. So that's all very well. I was out there making this language documentation, and then I was just thinking, who is the audience of this? A lot of material is being produced. Quite a lot of people are being funded to or otherwise engaged in language documentation. Who's going to listen to this stuff? Who's going to watch this stuff? And it became apparent to me that the Endangered Languages archives are very well-meaning. They want to preserve this stuff, and they would like to also present it to a wider public. But actually, they haven't really been successful at doing that yet. It's quite difficult to access material. For a start, most people don't know that there is such a thing as an endangered language archive. And then, even if you get to them on the web, you can't automatically find anything that's interesting or fun or amusing, or all you find out is that you can't really see anything until you subscribe, until you become a member, and not many people are going to do that. And more than that, I guess it has to be said that really a lot of the material is not that interesting. I think video in language documentation, it's actually the most interesting stuff that there is in there. And most people who do a language documentation project are creating quite a lot of video. And there's very good reasons to do that, because there's a lot of stuff associated with language that is not auditory. There's gesture, facial expression, a lot of things that it's good to hear, it's good to see what goes along with the sound. But I guess I was going through, as part of a project, going through the Endangered Language Archive, just seeing what kind of video was in there. I really thought I'll be doing our best, and I decided that there were two main types of videos in there. There was the sit and talk kind, and this is an illustration of that. So this is from my project a few years ago. Here are Willem, Annes and Bert. And here they are 63 minutes later. They had a nice talk. They covered a lot of topics. I mean, it was like many of my recordings from that project, where really the speakers are very elderly. The main genre was extended reminiscence, I guess. I like watching it, but it's not really very interesting, you have to say. It's not the most lively of things. To be honest, I don't really have a problem with this genre of things. I think I did a reasonable job. I put the camera somewhere where you could see them all, and it stayed there. And if I was going to be rude, a lot of the people who've submitted things to the archive have done a lot worse. They've pointed the camera somewhere else. They've pointed the camera at people who then went out of shot and didn't come back. One memorable video I watched, they followed a duck down a path. So I think mine's better than that, but it's dull. It's a good way of recording, I guess, a reasonably natural and audible conversation, but it's not exciting to watch, I guess. So another genre is the point and show, where you would pan around and look at everything. So this is also one of mine. I'm a little bit ashamed of it, I guess, because here's a garden, and the camera wasn't great. I'm panning around. Look, there's my speaker. Oh no, I'm not interested in him. What's over there? Oh look, a fire. And what's over there? some trees. It's amazing. So that goes on for a while. And I made that 6 or 7 years ago, and I will own up to not having very good camera skills at that time. And I'm not going to take the full blame for it, because camera manufacturers lead you to do this kind of thing. They've made lots of tiny cameras. Cameras are really small, so feel free to wave them around. They've got a zoom. You should zoom in and zoom out again. Whoosh. Problem is, it does look awful when you do that. So I guess that made me have a bit of a self-criticism session, I guess, and it comes down to the question is, well, should LDC, I'm going to explain that, which is language documentation and conservation, should it be watchable? And well, I think, sure, why not? I'm not actually going to argue for that, I'm just going to assert it. I'm going to say, if you're going to do that, if you've been funded to go out and record stuff, and if you're dealing with communities who are doing interesting things, they live in wonderful places, they're interesting characters, and they've got interesting stories to tell, you should probably make an effort. I've got a little quote from Gerrit Diemendal, who said, linguists should learn from ethno-cinematographic contributions. There's an aesthetic aspect to the video documentation of communicative behaviour. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly look at my 2 case studies. So one of them is about the sugar palms. It's a nice tree. I'm a fan of this tree. They're found all over tropical Asia, but Minahasan has bred particularly productive varieties, and they will produce up to 40 litres of sap a day if they are used properly. It can be boiled to produce palm sugar, or you can just leave it and it will ferment into saguer, which is a lightly alcoholic drink. So this is the magic alcohol tree. In fact, it will produce a sap that is a kind of beer strength drink within a couple of hours, and it costs almost nothing. It can be distilled also into a disgusting kind of whiskey thing. The fruit can be boiled and made into sweets. The bark and fibres are made into ropes and brooms. The leaves are made into thatch, and the fallen trees host large edible grubs, sago grubs, which are known as water locally, I think. I'm just going to show you some because they look cool. So that's a 3-minute video that I will not show now, but just to let you know what the grubs look like. I need to find my way back to the presentation. Yep. Modernization is taking place. So traditionally palm sugar was produced near the trees. The sap was collected twice a day in bamboo tubes, and then it's boiled over a fire. Then it gets thick, you have to boil it for many hours, it gets thick, and then you pour it into coconut shells, and then you tip them out of the coconut shells, and then you take it to the market where nobody will even buy it because they're not interested anymore, because they want nice, clean, powdered sugar that comes in bag. So, justifiably, people have stopped doing that. They don't like to do that anymore. They have been selling it to a factory, and the factory sends out tankers. The tankers come and collect bottles from the farmers. They boil and dry it in a factory and put it into nice little plastic bags. So this is kind of the difference between the old way and the new way. So we've got one guy who basically did the whole process, and he would spend all day, every day, making about 80 lumps of palm sugar that he could then sell for virtually nothing. Or you can sell it to these guys and they'll boil it up and they'll make this thing. That's of course that's not something that I personally have any problem with. This is in fact a better model. The old way, they're chopping down lots of trees, they're using a lot of firewood. It's not environmentally very friendly. The factory is better from that point of view. It's powered by biogas, etc., etc., etc. So I made a video of producing this palm sugar during a previous project in 2005 to 2007, and had it narrated. And the reason I went for a narration is that the speaker can't go, he's not going to be climbing up any trees anymore. He wants to be sitting in a house and watching it and telling me what happens. So this, I'll just show a second or two of it. So he's watching it, I'm showing you what he sees as well. I've translated it, etc., etc., etc. So I thought that works quite well because the speaker can't climb up the trees, and the guy who is climbing the tree can't actually provide the narration because he's up a tree. He can't shout down to me about what's going on. So I decided that narrated videos were really the way to go. It's good for getting data for me because I can show a video to a lot of people, and I can collect data that's then going to be readily comparable. And I can use different parameters, so I can collect it from men and from women, from old people, from younger people, across dialects, across languages. It's nice for me to be able to get that much data. And they're describing a natural activity that they know about. It's a traditional activity that they have the vocabulary for, and that's vocabulary that is dying out also. So then I realized that actually if I did a better job, if I tried to film them well, then they could be potentially interesting to watch and could appeal both to the communities and to casual viewers. And to do that, well, editing is very important. We had some discussion before about how much training people need to be able to edit something down to something that's watchable. People don't have much attention span. Nobody wants to watch a 2-hour video about boiling up in real time palm sugar. It has to be made quick. So that led me on to another sub-project which is about food. We are in Hong Kong, and people in Hong Kong love food just as in any other place, I suppose. Minahasans have a particular attachment to their cuisine, and they have a notorious use of what I've called festive meats. These are snake, bat, dog, cat. Well, and then there are ones they're not allowed to eat anymore, the monkeys and the tarsiers. And food is a particular focus of nostalgia in the diaspora communities, and so this is just a quick illustration of that. This was a 2-year discussion on Facebook about how best to cook things in bamboo. And most of the participants actually weren't in Minahasa, they were from the diaspora communities. So that got me making cooking videos, and I've made them for quite a few local recipes, and I've been using them to elicit narrations from, so far, only 5 people, but that's a growing list of people. All the narrations get used as data by me, but the best ones I kind of pick as a narration that goes with that language, if you know what I mean. So I'll just quickly show a little bit of the bat one. Maybe not too much because it's a bit gruesome. It's too fit to the screen. Just as a matter of interest, the subtitles come out of my research anyway. I'm already transcribing and translating all this material because I need to have access to it. So I just export it and add it to the videos. Okay, so I'll kind of whiz through this. There are the... They don't look very happy, do they? Never mind. Okay, yeah, you get the idea. Pull out the bits. make sure you've got enough wings. There are the wings in the bucket. There we go. All right, we've taken them home now. We bought 3 of them. Chop them up. And then, this is my favorite bit. Right, missing the subtitle. You have to boil it for about 2 hours first because they smell so bad. And boiling them gets rid of the smell. Meanwhile, all right, this is... So I'm being very, very comprehensive here. We find out everything we need. So we just all learned the words for these ingredients in tombulu, and that is useful to know. Chop them up, grind them in the pestle and water. We also need to make coconut cream, so I've got the whole process of doing that. We pour out the stinky water. Does too. Then we fry it up. You get the general idea, and by the end you have a nice plate of fat. That's my PhD student. It's actually not that bad. It's as the festive meats go, it's certainly the preferable one. So the question is now, okay, I'm going to draw it to a close. What I will quickly say is, so I want to deliver these videos to people. How am I going to do it? That's the problem, really. So it's quite possible to download these videos and to watch different subtitles using media players. You can even choose different audio tracks. I want to do it online, but I can't yet. Looking at the ways of providing videos online, there's Vimeo, which is good quality and has an active user community, won't let you do subtitles. There's YouTube, which does let you do subtitles very easily, and so that's in fact the solution I went for. You can't select different audio tracks, so for each different language I need a different file. It's got a large user community and it's got the very dregs of humanity commenting on there. So far, 4,530 people have watched the Tombulu video about sago grubs, and that's the most watched Tombulu broadcast ever. So I'm going to take some credit for that. They link them and discuss them in Facebook groups. There are still some problems. Narrators are hypercritical about the activities. They say, I wouldn't cook it like that. I don't mind that because that's just language data. That's great, but they do complain about it. Some people are really never going to become voiceover professionals. They're not very good at it. That's fine. And some manage to thwart my attempts to video their narrations by doing this. So he's watching it on an iPad, and I decided to hold it right up in front of his face so I can't actually video his face. But anyway, sorry I went over time, but thank you.